Welcome to MMA Fancast. My name's Luke, and I am joined tonight by an often guest of the show and a friend of mine, Hunter Starner. Hunter, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Luke. Thanks for having me again.
Well, one of the reasons why you're on the show so often is because you've stayed so busy, both as an amateur MMA fighter, and then you went over to Thailand. So we talked about that a couple different times. And now you're on the show to talk about the fact that you just had your MMA pro debut, which you won. And now you're 2 weeks away from your next pro MMA fight. So let's go with the one that just happened 2 weeks ago, and then we'll cover both of them. So congratulations, you're now an undefeated pro fighter. You debuted in Virginia after fighting all over as an amateur. So what was that experience like for you?
It was awesome. I mean, it was just like, I treated just like my past fights. I mean, the only difference between my amateur and pro one, or the pro one I just did, was obviously I was getting paid. So it was no different, but it did feel cool going in as, my pro debut, but I try not make it too big of a deal that it is. I try to just keep it in perspective. It's just another fight and just go out there and do my thing.
Well, the tool set does open up a little bit. You won by decision. Was there any aspect, of course, that's a 15-minute fight, so let's talk there. What was it like? I know you're a cardio conditioning machine, you're a wrestler, so obviously that's something all wrestlers pride themselves in. What was it like, the difference between thinking you could go 15 minutes and actually doing it in your first fight?
Yeah, honestly, it felt fine. I know my cardio is already pretty good, and we had a good camp, and I conditioned well. And when we do our sparring before these fights, we do like 7-minute rounds, and we do like 3 to 5 of those. And so my cardio felt fine. I know myself pretty well in the first round, since that's kind of like the get everything out round and kind of like get the jitters out and stuff. I know I always feel a little more tired than I should the first round, but once I ease into the fight, came like midway through the second and the third round, I felt fine, just like I did in the first round. So I know my body well. I know that I'm going to catch my second win midway into the fight if it makes it that far. So I'm glad I know that about myself. And yeah, it was no different. It felt fine to me.
Well, I think you really broke down. I've worked with long distance runners before, and it's kind of the same thing where the first few miles, you're kind of letting your body adjust, and you could kind of feel a little winded, but you know that you have more in the tank, like you were saying. The first round, it's getting used to it, but then you had round 2 and 3. We talked about the fact that you had taken all this development time, 7-0 as an amateur, held off your pro debut just about a year in order to improve and take on, at the time, of undefeated 6-0 Cam the Mole Rat Algar. You made a trip into a hostile area for 247 Fighting Championships. How we got to know each other, and you did that to test yourself. What was it like, with all that preparation, making your debut, where it is pro rules, where knees and elbows and head kicks and all that stuff is allowed, given the fact of all the development you had? Do you feel you and the Renegade Combat Sports Club coaches made the right decision to develop you the way they did prior to your pro debut?
Oh, definitely. I think a good thing about taking that long in between fights, because when me and Camp fought, that was back in February. This was 2 weeks ago. Taking all that time in between to not only develop, but also for me, it like builds up that fire inside. Like, I want to compete badly. So then when I was finally able to compete 2 weeks ago, I felt refreshed. I felt excited. So it was awesome. And I definitely could tell from being at Tiger Muay Thai for 2 months and just everything in between. It didn't all show. I mean, I still want to show all my tools I have. People still think I'm just a wrestler, and I want that to get out of people's minds, because I didn't just wrestle this guy, but I took him down, kept him on the ground. That's basically what it was. And I still want to show people I can strike, that I have a complete full game and it could use all my tools. So, and I'm looking forward to showing people that. And my future fights shortly here to come. But yeah, all the development time we took, and the long gap in between fights, it really helped. I just felt refreshed. I felt excited about this fight, and I loved it.
Well, as you brought up prior to the fight, it's important to round your skill set like you're talking about and show off, like you were saying, the well rounded game plan. At the same time, at the pro level, you need the wins because all pro wins count. There's no reset like there's an amateur. Of course, you were undefeated in amateur, so it doesn't really connect there. But it is important to go to the path of least resistance to get the win. You mentioned striking and elbows. You have a fight coming up November 10th for CFFC, which is a very high level regional, and now not even strictly regional. They're on UFC Fight Pass for people that know that name. And you're about ready to go down to Tampa, Florida, because they have branched out a little bit. They're mainly still Philadelphia and a couple of the casinos in Atlantic City. That's kind of where they were birthed out of. But not only are you flying down to Tampa to take on your opponent's flying in from Japan, at least I would assume, because because he's 3-1. He won 3 fights in a row. You know all this, but for our audience, an armbar win. So he has got submissions on the ground, punches and elbows, TKO, and a decision win. Plus, then he is coming off a decision loss. So what makes, and I'm going to butcher his name, but I'm going to be as on point as it could be, what makes Naki Harata a good opponent for you? And I know I butchered his name. I apologize to your opponent ahead of time. What makes you say yes to a guy who's had 3 pro fights, 3 different ways, a decision, a submission, and TKO? Of course, he's coming off a loss, but he's looked really good in his pro career out there in Japan.
Yeah, literally it was 2 days, not even, maybe a day after my fight. My other coach, Michelle, she's basically like my manager. She's the fight maker. She's the one who finds me all these fights. And she sent me the text message of CFFC need an opponent for this guy. It'd be run really short notice for me because I just got done with the fight, but he didn't have an opponent yet. So I took a good 5-10 minutes thinking about it. Like, oh, I literally just fought, but I felt good. I didn't take much damage. It's not like I kill myself to make weight. I know I can make weight fairly, not easily. It's always going to suck, but it takes me good 2-3 weeks where I can make weight comfortably. And that's literally 3 weeks from when I fought. That's when this fight's going to be. And so I was like, then she always sends me YouTube videos of the guys in the fight. So she sent me some YouTube videos. I saw he's mainly a ground guy, has a little bit of striking, but not really. But he's mainly a ground guy, tries to get people on the ground. So I think, to me, that's a good matchup because he hasn't, from what I've seen, I've only watched one of his fights, but
Sure.
I don't know. Japan's not known for being great, having great wrestlers. I want to show him. I have some pretty good wrestling because I'm pretty confident. I don't think he can take me down. So I want to prove that. I want to prove myself right. And I know he's 3-1, so that means something at the pro level. And
Sure.
give me that competition. And fresh off the fight, I'm already in shape. All I have to do is just get back down the weight comfortably, and I feel good. Like I said, didn't take much damage, and I think we're going to match up well. And I feel like this is the fight where I can show a lot of my tools more so than I did the last fight.
That's the mindset of somebody like you, who this is your career. This is what you've been building to for years. And I've said this, we've had this discussion because of your fight versus Cam Allgaier, which seemed so unique for both of you guys, because a lot of amateurs build up their record in order to go pro against the easiest wins, not the hardest wins. And both you guys have that mindset. You've actually said, even in your debut opponent, he had a good record as an amateur. And and you talked about that. You want to fight people that a win against whoever you fight is meaningful. And to your point, I know American wrestling, particularly East Coast American wrestling, Pennsylvania, Virginia, all the places you've wrestled at, Ohio, is considered sort of really a hotbed for wrestling, and
Yeah.
there's a lot of pride that wrestlers take from sort of that tri-state area in wrestling. And as you said, Japan is not known. We know right now that the former USSR regions, all the stands are known as combat samba. And I've had a guest on a couple times, Pastore, not a guy you know, Brett Pastore, just fought for 247, but his goal is to become the first ever American-born world combat samba champion. And he's going to fight over there in the next couple weeks. So it could happen. But, you know, regions become known. America's known for American style wrestling. Obviously, all the old stands, the old Soviet Union's known for combat samba. Japan is originally known for Japanese jiu-jitsu, which then got transferred over to Brazil and became Brazilian jiu-jitsu. So, you know, each area has their own skill set. So I think that's incredible that you're looking at this. One thing, as I'm looking through, yes, all of his fights have been in Japan for the same promotion, but just something, because you mentioned your weight cut. He last fought at 146.1 pounds. So he's been a featherweight. This is at a bantamweight fight, isn't it? Or are you coming up?
It is.
Okay.
It is bantamweight. And that's another reason I was like, when I saw that, I was like, this fight intrigues me more, because whenever I see that, at least from what I've seen, people who cut down to extra weight class than what they're used to fighting at, all those past fights, well, they get gassed sooner, and because they don't know how to cut that. Especially if you're not a wrestler. We wrestlers, especially lifelong wrestlers like me, we know how to cut weight. But guys like that who don't have a wrestling background and really haven't cut a lot of weight, I know they're not going to do it right. So that intrigues me, and I know
Sure.
I'm going to have the gas tank. The question is he going to have the gas tank?
Yeah, I mean, that's an incredible mindset to have. I know TJ Dillashaw just lost again at bantamweight, but when he went down to flyweight, when he went down to flyweight, it was terrible. And it was pretty obvious at bantamweight that he didn't have a lot to give up, you know. And it's interesting how, to your point, that we've seen it at the top level, that sometimes changing weight categories, and obviously hats off to your opponent. He's flying over for Japan. So there's no ill will there. I mean, it's a great opportunity for him. Clearly he thinks that getting a win against you matters, and it will matter, you know, and you getting a win against him matters. And that's the type of fight you want. Seeing a picture of him, it's always hard to tell. He certainly doesn't look like he was a chubby 145er. So
no, he was in shape.
Yeah. So I think what you're pointing out is why the fights matter. But inside the cage is what matters. That you want to go into a fight where there is likely a competitive advantage. If he, and this might sound strange to people watching this, but if he was weighing in at a featherweight fight at, like, let's say 143.2 or something, for me as a commentator, I would look at that and say, oh, he's got some weight to give. Like, he's kind of a little under featherweight maybe, but weighing in at 146.1 to me looks like getting down to 145 was a bit of an issue. So hats off to your opponent for going through the pain and suffering to make 135. And obviously, as you said, that's something that you know you could do. You've done it many times now, but there is a competitive advantage to you. And let's be honest, he's trying for the competitive advantage to be bigger. I mean, we all know it's a competitive advantage matchup. You want the competitive advantage, understandably, of durability and endurance and ability to outlast him. And he wants the competitive advantage to be bigger, which is sort of that wrestling mindset. But when it comes to it, because I want to tie in, we've talked about it, MMA. You had 2 fights just a couple months ago in July. How much was the confidence in striking? Because Pro MMA has much, that's like the thing that changes in Pro MMA is striking on the feet, and then of course elbows on the ground versus closed fists on the ground. That's about it that changes on the ground. So what was it like gearing up for your first pro fight and now your second pro fight, knowing that you've done basically pro rule style Muay Thai?
I think taking those 2 pro Muay Thai fights in Thailand, that's what is going to make the difference, and what made the difference in my pro debut and this fight. And I'm so glad I did that. That helped me so much, because obviously it's Muay Thai. I can't go to the ground. I was forced to strike and throw, you know, shit ton of leg kicks I've never thrown before. And, you know, and so it's, I'm so glad I did that, because from here on out, I know if I have to, and if my takedowns are getting stuffed, if going to the ground's not working, or the guy's just keeping good distance and he's a longer guy, I know I can strike. I know I can, bite down on my mouth guard and bang with a guy, because I told you, like my first guy I fought in Muay Thai, I'm not exaggerating when I say he's a good 20 pounds heavier, because I told you we didn't weigh in. We just
Right.
fought around the guy's weight. And I saw the guy, he was about 5'10", 5'11". I'm like 5'7", and he's like 20 pounds heavier than me. And every shot he got on me, it hurt. And that lasted 5 3-minute rounds. So I know if it comes to it, that I can bite down my mouth guard. I know I have a decent chin, and I know I can strike with guys. So those 2 fights helped me realize that, yeah, I could bang with dudes as well.
And that's exactly what we talked about before you flew over to Thailand, how important you thought that training was going to be over there, and to take fights because you had this game plan long term of your pro career, and needing to have those skills now that it's wide open. I was looking, I know CFFC develops talent very well. And there's a guy I've had on this program a couple of times, Mark Gray, who's 2-0 at 135. He happens to fight on your same card. And I know that tends to be, you're smiling, that tends to be what promotions do. Promotions, UFC does this. If you look at cards, they tend to put similar weight classes on cards. One, because if anything falls through, there's always sort of a backup. And also, and we've seen this at the UFC level and all levels, also because it means that winners or losers, but winners and losers are kind of on the same timetable. And so it's very common for 2 winners from the same card at the same weight class to then get matched up. Since you're smiling, I'm guessing you've already kind of taken a look and already kind of have Mark Gray and others on your horizon.
They're definitely I'll definitely be paying attention to that fight. That was actually, Mark Gray was actually the guy when I was trying to get that fight with Icon. Well, he didn't have an opponent. CFFC didn't have an opponent for him yet, and it was like it would have been a week and a half notice for me. And I accepted the fight, and they went back to him, and his camp said, no, we'll wait. And so ever since that, he's been on my radar. I know he's a stud wrestler from Cornell. I think he was a couple-time NCAA qualifier. Obviously, I'm paying attention to this fight I have right now, and I got to win this one first, but I would love to see that guy in the future for sure.
Well, I think that's what makes this, you could consider it early pro career. I've looked at a lot of fighters that make it to the UFC, and you'll see an early pro career fight versus 2 known guys now, right? Because that's what happens at the UFC, Bellator, one, WSOF, whatever it is. There's that idea that sometimes people get matched up early in their career, and that's really a deciding factor for somebody's career. And we've seen it happen where people fight 2 or 3 times because they're kind of on that collision course. We had talked about it with Cam Allgaier, that you guys met as undefeated amateurs, and there's a decent chance that you could potentially meet again as a pro down the road, depending on what he does in his career. And we've kind of talked about how if you end up meeting the same fighters a couple times, we just mentioned Mark Gray, and hats off to him. He's undefeated as an amateur, undefeated as a pro, very similar to you. And you mentioned his fantastic wrestling background at Cornell. But if you guys were to fight at some point in the future, and then maybe even again in the future, it likely means that your careers continue on well, right? Ring matches come out when people continue to be relevant fighters. So it's really cool to see that your mind is sort of aware of the possibilities while also focused on the fight in front. Let's talk about the fact that you are flying to Tampa. Does that change anything? You just flew to Thailand, way farther away, but I know you gave yourself some recovery time. You were there for close to 2 months. So what's it like with that travel, and does anything change with you flying down to Tampa?
Yeah, we actually decided we're actually gonna drive down there.
Okay.
Even though it's obviously that's like a 16-hour drive, but I'd rather drive, honestly. To me, I don't think it's gonna affect me. It is what it is. It's just that's what's gonna take us traveling, whether we fly or drive to different states to take these fights, especially in a CFFC, LFA, whoever I end up fighting for at the time. And, you know, there's gonna be a lot of traveling, and this is just the first step. And we chose to, I think we're going to, the weigh-ins are, it's weird. The fight's on a Thursday and weigh-ins are Wednesday. So we're going to drive early Monday, hopefully get there at a decent time Monday. Probably cut some weight a little bit that night, and then just take off, kind of acclimate to everything, and just get the car ride out of me Monday night, and then Tuesday just worry about making weight, and Showtime Wednesday, and obviously the real Showtime Thursday.
Right. Well, it also shows, and I think this is always good for people to watch, that I think it's really cool when promotions put on, you know, like middle of the week cards. Or 247 once did a promotion the Wednesday before Thanksgiving, so the day before Thanksgiving, which was much better because that same year they did Saturday after Thanksgiving, which meant the people cutting weight for that didn't like Thanksgiving, whereas the day before Thanksgiving, at least you could still enjoy Thanksgiving. But I do think it's cool for the fans to have fights on other days than just Saturday, even though Saturday is traditional. But to your point, it does change sort of the setup for the fighters.
Mhm.
Your travel days different, the way you kind of structure your weight cut and all that stuff is different as well. It's also sort of ironic that this is your first fight for CFFC because, or as a pro, because they're more in your area, in the New Jersey, Philly area than Tampa. But of course, a fight in Florida always sounds like a good idea. Well, I guess it's been some time since I've asked you to go through your sponsor list. And I think we should give some opportunity, because I know you're always grateful for your parents because they've been so supportive of you since you decided to get into MMA and kind of what that career means as far as, you know, your flexibility and job and all that. But I'm sure you have a sponsor list going into your second pro fight. It's always important for people that watch this to recognize how important sponsorships are to fighters before they make it to any of the bigs. And I still call it WSOF. People tease me every time. It's PFL now. I just like World Series of Fighting because I happen to be a baseball fan, and the Phillies are in the World Series. So that's where my brain was, but congrats to the Phillies. But PFL is, I think, a really cool concept because of the $1 million tournament. I think somebody like you and others, tournaments tend to attract fighters that don't care about ranking so much as matchups, which is more of a wrestling mindset, where wrestlers, every time they do something, it's a tournament. They can't really focus on this matchup over this matchup. Chael Sonnen wouldn't have fought Johnny Bones Jones in a tournament, right? That was because he talked his way into it. And there's value in that in MMA. But I do think it's kind of cool that the tournament style, at least in PFL, is holding, because somebody like you that really excels in kind of whatever the fight is directly ahead of them could benefit from a situation where it's more about win and keep moving on. But anyhow, let's get to your sponsors.
I only have one real sponsor right now, and his name's Sean Lindsay. He owns a fine company here in Virginia. He works out of Richmond, and he's gonna kill me for not remembering his knife company's name, but it's like Fight Knives Company. I gotta look it up, but he's sponsored me for about a month now, and we're good friends. He trains at the gym as well, Renegade, and he gave me a little bit of cash for going to Thailand. It's been helping out. My new fight shorts that I wore in my pro debut, his company name's right on my butt, so you can see it nice and big when you see me fight. So, but yeah, he's my kind of like first legit only sponsor, and obviously the goal is to get more sponsors. But you know, I like to eventually, when I do, or if I ever do get more sponsors, I want to get sponsors that I actually use their products, or you know, I am close with them, and that's why, you know, he's a good family friend, and he offered to sponsor me. And yeah, I want to thank Sean Lindsay, and then also I'll thank my my coaches as well. Again, you know, especially with the pro debut and taking their time and to sacrifice us driving down to Tampa, Florida, Michelle and Kelly. You know, they're freaking, they do all this for me, and it makes a world of difference. We're one big family. This is what our team, Renegade Combat Sports, we're a big family. I don't look at that as like a sports team or like a big, like, we're not like any big super gym. We're not these America top teams or, even like little regional gyms that are way bigger than ours. No, we have a few guys that come there and are members, and we train hard. When we have fights, we get behind the guys that have fights, and we stick with each other, and we're family. So I want to thank them. Obviously, thank my parents, and like I said, thanks Sean Lindsay for sponsoring me. And yep.
Well, that is a great list, and I agree with you. I've had fighters on, and obviously some fighters love the huge gyms with the dormitories where people are flying in from all over the world all the time. But I do think we have also seen a resurgence of the small gyms, and
Yeah.
I would always say, it's whatever works best for you. And given the fact that this gym, like you said, these two coaches and everybody else has really allowed you to develop, I think that truly does make a difference when it considers going pro, staying pro. I know Stipe Miocic was kind of one of the first, at least that I remember, that stayed with Strong Style. I'm sure that's a slightly bigger gym than what you have, but still, he had a lot of pressure and became heavyweight champ at the UFC level to go to like one of these super gyms. And it's just cool because I don't know the coach's name. You would recognize him, the skinny coach that always wears the headband and always holds mitts.
Oh yeah.
Stipe, that coach. Yeah. I don't know it either, but he's like a legit coach from Strong Style. He happened to be in Pittsburgh the other day at 247 at an event that we did to help a very low level pro to coach a low level pro. And it just clicked on me that like, that's the advantage of these smaller teams. That the same coach who's in the corner of like 5 heavyweight championships of the world for Stipe at UFC is also at 247 with a guy who I think was, under 3 fights as a pro. And I think that just kind of shows kind of what you're talking about, that these smaller gyms matter, that the coaches are able to put the effort into somebody. And just because we're on this topic, probably the greatest example of this, and he then became light heavyweight champ of UFC, Glover Teixeira.
Yeah.
Came all the way from Connecticut because he has a gym. If people don't know,
Mhm.
he had a gym. He came all the way from Connecticut to Pittsburgh to corner an 0-0 debut amateur. I kid you not.
I think
And
I think that was the fight I was there because I remember his
yes,
team in there.
that was your fight because that was the only time he come down. Rizzo, I believe, was the guy's last name. He ended up getting a win, but
Yeah.
that to me really showed, if anybody's in the Connecticut area, go to Glover Teixeira's gym because he was a month or 2 away from what ended up becoming his championship. And he was still driving down the 8-9 hours to a fight to corner an 0-0 debut. And I've got to be honest, if I was anywhere at his level, I probably wouldn't be cornering an 0-0 debut. But hats off to Glover and other types of coaches who put that effort out, because you've got to put it out when they're developing. So we've gone on that tangent, but we always do this when we talk because I think you like sort of the mental aspect of the fight game. And to give a shout out to your coach, and co-owner of your gym. I hope to have him on. We've been in contact, Kelly McCann. We've been in contact. I hope to have him on as a guest because he's a legendary fighter in his own right. And now he's been coaching and really putting all the time, effort into you and others at Renegade Sports. So that's just a shout out to him. And hopefully hopefully soon we'll be able to have him on the show to talk and kind of get some feedback on you. I'm sure we'll end up talking about you when we talk to Kelly, because I want to know about what Kelly sees in you in the future. So
Yeah, that'll be good. He has a lot of insight. He's super intellectual and he's awesome. He's like, I think I've said this in the past. He's like my fight dad. Like I look at him as my fight dad. They're all family, him, Michelle. So they're great people. Awesome.
Well, I really appreciate you taking the time. Shout out to your sponsor. And I think it does really go a long way for people to know that investing, and I would always say this, investing in friends is what matters, whether they're fighters or just a friend from wherever, supporting friends, I think really does make a huge difference. And so thanks so much, champ. I think you ended up winning 3 amateur belts before you went pro.
Yes. Yep.
Yes, because I used to call you champ because
Yes.
Henry Cejudo kind of made that as triple C. But I called you champ. But I appreciate you taking the time. It's been an honor. Probably my favorite interview was like 12 hours before you flew to Thailand. You jumped on and we were able to do an interview that was right before you went to Thailand. You were kind enough as you were packing to squeeze me in. So thanks so much. Reminder to everybody to tune in. I know CFFC is very watchable. They have a pay-per-view through CFFC. They always do, plus most of their fights. And I'm sure this one is streamed on UFC Fight Pass. So for people that have UFC Fight Pass, check out the whole card, but definitely Hunter, Showtime, Starner. It's just an honor to see you. Best skills to you coming up in that CFFC fight. And congratulations on your successful pro debut. Thanks so much for coming on.
Thank you, Luke. Very much appreciated.
I appreciate you. Take care.
Thank you, you too.